Welcome to our channel. I wish you a pleasant viewing. The second part of the Chronicles of Cursed Radiation will provide information about the secondary use of nuclear weapons and the terrible effects of artificial radiation on people and everything around them. It will also be discussed whether the bombing of the second Japanese city was necessary if, according to President Truman and some historians, the first bombing justified itself. The second atomic bombing of the Japanese city of Nagasaki occurred just 3 days after the bombing of Hiroshima. When the Japanese were still aware of the consequences of the first bombing, the lack of time between the bombings has led some historians to call the second bombing definitely unnecessary, inappropriate at best, and at worst, genocide and unjustified. In response to such statements, Robert Maddox, professor of history at the University of Pennsylvania, noted, some historians point out that although the first bombing may have been necessary in order to achieve Japan's surrender, the second bombing was an unnecessary act of barbarism. However, events prove the opposite. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like it. I promise mutual subscription. American officials believed that more than one bomb would be needed, as they assumed that supporters of the continuation of the war in Japan would seek to minimize the effect of the first explosion or try to explain it by a natural disaster that actually occurred. For 3 days between the bombings, the Japanese Minister of War, for example, refused to even admit that the bomb dropped on Hiroshima was atomic. A few hours after Nagasaki, he told the cabinet that it looks like the Americans have 100 atomic bombs, and they can drop 3 a day. Tokyo may well be the next target. On the second day after the bombing of Nagasaki, Truman said, "The only language they understand is the language of bombing. When you have to deal with an animal, you have to treat it like an animal. It's very sad, but it's true nonetheless." The Atomic Bombing Commission, abbreviated ABCC, was established in 1946 in accordance with a presidential directive from Harry S. Truman. This organization studied the health of the Hibakusha, but did not treat them. As a result, Hibakusha criticized this organization as experimental in relation to the human body. When the Hibakusha refused to undergo routine medical examinations, the ABCC threatened to court-martial them for war crimes. Moreover, when the Hibakusha died, the ABCC members came straight to their home and took their bodies for autopsy. It is believed that the organs of at least 1,500 bodies were sent to the Institute of Pathology in Washington. Many Hibakusha spoke of the humiliation they were subjected to when they were forced to pose naked 4 hours, so that ABCC staff would photograph, videotape, and examine them like guinea pigs. This included demonstrating their extremely unpleasant baldness, donating blood and tissue samples without any support or assistance. Most of the women who survived the bombing and became pregnant had miscarriages. The children who were born alive suffered from microcephaly, cardiovascular diseases, and severe mental retardation caused by high levels of radiation exposure in the womb. The women were told that it was due to stress and poor nutrition, which made them blame themselves for the situation. Washington initially denied that radiation exposure, even after many years, could lead to numerous health problems. Since 1957, victims of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki have received free medical care, and the cost of their treatment is fully funded by the Japanese government. In total, about 650,000 people have been granted the status of Hibakusha. As of March 2018, more than 154,000 of them are still alive. Nagasaki. During commemorative ceremonies, it always remains in the shadow of Hiroshima, which was hit by the atomic bomb on August 6, 1945, 3 days before the bombing of Nagasaki. Even the program of Barack Obama's historic visit to Japan in 2016 included Hiroshima, but not Nagasaki. The victims of the bombing in Nagasaki are several times less than in Hiroshima. 70,000 people died in the city, 135,000 in Hiroshima, and this is despite the fact that a more powerful bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. a bomb codenamed Fat Man was dropped on Nagasaki. The bomb weighed 4.6 tons and had a diameter of 152 centimeters. The Fat Man worked on the basis of the decay of plutonium-239. The explosive power of this bomb was about 21,000 tons of TNT equivalent. On August 9, 1945, when the planes involved in the operation reached their target, the city of Kokura, the American military saw that the entire area was covered with fog. So they headed for the backup target, Nagasaki. So, about the problem of genocide. The reason why the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki are not and have never been considered acts of genocide is that their goal was never to further destroy the Japanese nation. In a diary entry dated July 25, 1945, Truman wrote that he told the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Stimson, to use it so that the targets would be military installations, soldiers and sailors, not women and children, and that the target would be purely military, and the United States would make a cautionary statement, including which would ask the Japanese to surrender and save lives. Moreover, in a letter to Senator Richard Russell dated August 9, 1945, Truman made it clear that personally, I regret the need to destroy entire nations because of the stubbornness of national leaders. And for your information, I am not going to do this until it becomes absolutely necessary. My goal is to save as many American lives as possible, but I also have a humane attitude towards women and children in Japan. If the goal had been genocide, the United States would not have accepted Japan's surrender and would have continued bombing until nothing but ashes remained from all the islands. The United States would also set up execution camps for Japanese after it took over the Japanese mainland. For many decades, millions of Americans have been convinced that it was the Kid and the Fat Man who were able to stop the war and thereby save the lives of both Americans and Japanese. However, the survivors disagree that the world needed such sacrifices. As the Japanese newspaper Asahi Shimbun wrote, those who fled the scene of the fire resembled crowds of the dead who had come from the other world. Despite the help, people were dying, and many of them were conscious and even asked to commit suicide as soon as possible. Some were lucky to escape suffering. Closer to the epicenter of the explosion, due to the release of heat, only black footprints remained on the ground. Most likely, they did not even realize that they had died. Seiko Fujimoto survived the bombing of Hiroshima when she was 3 years old. Fujimoto was playing near her house with her dog when the United States dropped the bomb. I watched something descend from the sky. As far as I remember, something like a balloon, the woman shared. After that, she remembers only the strongest wind. As it turned out, she and her younger brother survived, were hospitalized, and then reunited with their parents. The city burned for 3 days. According to her, after the bombing, there were problems with food in the city, and people, unaware of the radiation, ate everything they could find. Water has become a treat. People started stealing from hunger. That's how we lived in the early days. But now we've forgotten about it. Then the family moved to Tokyo, and Fujimoto was forbidden to tell anyone that she had survived the bombing. Others were afraid that the girl would not be able to marry. The woman's brother died at the age of 4. She still remembers how he dreamed of watermelon, but was never able to fulfill his dream and enjoy life. Fujimoto has not eaten watermelon since his death. Amiko Okada tells us, all of a sudden, my hair started falling out and my gums started bleeding. I felt tired all the time and thought only about where to lie down. No one knew what radiation was. It wasn't until 12 years later that I was diagnosed with aplastic anemia. Keiko Ogura was 8 years old when she was playing at home in Hiroshima and saw a blinding flash. It was dark, absolutely quiet. I didn't know what to do except sit down. All I could hear was my little brother crying. She shares her memories. Later, burned people began to flock to the temple next to her destroyed house. Their faces and hair were badly burned, and their skin was hanging down. They didn't say anything, just moaned and asked for water. Ogura brought water from the well to the victims. They drank it and died. I didn't know that giving people water in this condition was dangerous. For 10 years, I blamed myself for their deaths, she says. According to Reiko Navar, she was lucky to survive because her house was on the other side of the mountain from the epicenter. There wasn't a scratch on me, but the people on the other side of the mountain suffered terribly. Japanese woman Reiko have noted that due to the heat, the terrible smell and insect larvae, the bodies of the victims had to be cremated on the spot. They were piled in an empty school pool, surrounded with brushwood and burned. There was no way to even identify them. They passed away in a different way than people should, she said. I want to tell our story to the younger generation while I still can. I want every child to have a fulfilling life, which means we have to give up nuclear weapons right now. On August 15, 1945, Japan surrendered in World War II. Hiroshima and Nagasaki became cities destroyed by the atomic bomb. Today, these cities have become a symbol of the horrors of war. To be continued.